Yes, my name is Val Hansford. I'm at Soka University, and while Andy and Guy were talking very more practical approaches, I'm kind of an overview approach to this. Talking about the effective use of active learning in global higher education. Basically, I'm finding right now there's a lot of push for global higher education. Now we need more active learning, but it doesn't seem to be really effective. So I'm kind of arguing that we need to rethink the approach of how we bring in active learning. So my format today is I'm going to talk about what I see as the two of the biggest challenges or issues around these two ideas coming together. I'm going to give a definition of both active and passive learning to get an idea of what it is that we're talking about, because often people don't really know what active learning is. There's no clear definition. I'm going to introduce a couple of theories that I've learned about and I'm putting together as a way to sort of explain what we need to do, and then finally I'm going to end with, like, from these theories, what are the implications from that, and what do I recommend for implementing active learning? Okay. So, as I said, like, this conference is global higher education. The last few years, there's been a big push for global focus by the ministry, and so, you know, with the idea of, this is the term I think I heard last year, was talked about creating global human resources, which that term I have a lot of issues with myself, thinking of individuals as some kind of human resource.
Global human resource.
Yeah. So I think it comes from the business field. I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure where, but this last year at this conference, a couple of the presentations I was at, I believe that was the term that was being used, and I've heard it in other presentations. It's like I think it's an English translation of the Japanese term that's being used right now. Thinking of individuals, these students that we're creating for business in the future, that there's some kind of human resource that can help access the world for Japan.
We're producing students for business.
Well, I don't know if we really are, but my understanding is that's where MEX's push is coming from.
I see.
But, you know, again, we kind of question that. But what's happening is a lot of universities, per se, that's the area I'm more familiar with, are suddenly adding in courses with the word global or international in the title. And so suddenly that makes them a global focused university. I don't know if it's the same as the university some of you are at, but, you know, at my university I'm finding that's coming up, and it's like, okay, we've got the word global, now we're global. Huh? So, but I mean, some of them seem to be name-only changes, and there doesn't seem any change in the actual content of the course itself, just the name change. Others, they're like, okay, we've got the name and we'll add in some information about other countries into our course. So there's a little bit of content about other countries. But does that automatically mean that we're creating students who can function globally? I don't think so. Right? To me, that just doesn't seem to make sense. Just, okay, here's some information about a country, now you're global. So I think more is needed. So some of the things, like the ones that are adding some information in, they are providing some knowledge about other countries. So that's one element that is needed, to be more aware of these other countries. But I think a big part that needs to be dealt with in the classes is developing skills to help students function globally. Skills of, you know, analysis, seeing from multiple perspectives, being able to think critically about what they're learning, being able to adapt to differences, or even just solving problems. These are skills that can be done in the classroom that don't have to that need to be worked on and developed, right? More than just only the content. For the global component, they need to develop awareness. You can help students develop awareness about their global, what their choices and how that can affect the world globally, how the local affects the global, and vice versa. Being aware that there's different viewpoints, that just this one viewpoint that's being taught is not the only viewpoint. They need to learn that. And part of the global focus, students need to be able to develop empathy, sort of trying to understand a different perspective. But it's not something you can just assume that they will be able to do. A lot of times what happens is, I've had students sort of say that, oh, I was talking with this international student and they did this and that's wrong. Not trying to understand that they might have a different view on what they're doing. Sorry, am I losing people?
No.
No? Okay, I wasn't sure. I was trying to read the faces and I wasn't sure. So more is needed than just some content knowledge. There's also this, on the other side, this push for active learning. What I'm finding that there's different definitions or understanding of what is active learning and resistance. So a couple of examples. A colleague said to me the other day, oh, in my department, active learning is group discussion only. And I was, huh? And she herself was saying, this is ridiculous, that's not it. But at my university, there's a big push right now. We have to be active learning and we have to do a tick off a box in our syllabi that says it's an active learning class. And in her particular department, all those that are putting in a 5% or 10% of the whole assessment is group discussion. And so that makes them an active learning classroom. Okay? So there's this different definitions. I've been hearing things like, I'm doing group work and I'm using the recommended technology, but active learning is not working. So they're thinking of giving up because it doesn't seem to work. So a misunderstanding of what active means to be active learning. And also there's a lot of resistance. Some professors I'm hearing are saying things like, I have no time to do this active learning stuff. I have so much material I need to cover. There's no time for that. And so they're not even trying to incorporate it. They're resisting this. So this is going on. And then, as I mentioned earlier, a little bit of the assessment of the course doesn't even, in some cases, doesn't even reflect anything to do with anything that's active learning, or it's like 5 or 10%. Before coming this week, I went through my university's quick look for syllabi or courses that actually had global or international in their titles to see what is the assessment those professors have, and a lot of them still have the traditional 100% final exam or really high percentage, and then if they had anything, was 5 or 10% discussions. And so there was a very limited aspect. The assessment didn't reflect any of this active listening that was being pushed by the higher ups in the university. So I don't know if it's the same at other universities. Okay. So these different definitions or understanding of what it means to be an active learning classroom and the resistance, there's no clear answer. At my university, we're still waiting for the official English translation of what active learning is before we can implement anything. We're told you have to be doing active learning. And it's like, hold it. What do you consider? Trying to get that information. What's the purpose of active learning? Is it just because the president says we have to do active learning? We have to do this, but it's not just techniques. A lot of what I'm seeing is, okay, active learning is group discussion. or it's a particular technique, but not knowing why that technique is an active learning, is promoting active learning. Okay? That there's the idea of, are we just covering the surface, trying to cover a lot of material and just quick understanding? Or do we want students to have a deeper understanding of the content of what we're learning? So that's kind of a difference, and I think with active learning, students can develop a deeper understanding if it's done correctly. And a big thing for me, I think active learning needs to be connected to the students' own lives or their previous experience. So what Andy and Guy were talking about, they were trying to connect with the students, make it, especially Andy, you were talking with the books. You know, they were connecting and they were making choices in that discussion about the one boy.
Zombies in Tokyo.
Well, but the talk about like wanting to connect with that character of Dorothy. I want to meet Dorothy. I want to meet Dorothy. You know, there's some connection, right? And then relating it to their own experience thinking. So that's an important element, not just, I think a lot of times what happens is, you know, students study something in the class, they finish the class, they do the exam, they get the grade, and they forget everything. And it's gone, because it doesn't mean anything to them. Okay, so by my own sort of what is passive learning? I wanted to compare this to describe active learning. Now, I think passive learning is often what we think of as that traditional learning, where teacher stands at the front of the classroom and the students have to listen to what's being said. It involves a lot of rote memorization. They have to memorize what the teacher or what the expert is telling them so that they can repeat it back in some form on a test. Okay? There's the idea of the student's responsibility is they just have to record and absorb, take in like a sponge, this knowledge from the expert, and it doesn't really connect to their own life. So part of these were some of this was my idea, but I also got ideas from a couple of different sites that had their own definitions. It's hard to find a clear definition on some of these. Oops, what's going on here? Okay, so with that as a base, what is active learning? For me, I think what active learning is students are actively engaged with the material. And it's not the same thing every time. You try to look at it in different ways. Some examples include peer discussion or group discussion, peer review. You write something and you give it to a partner and they give advice to help you correct and improve it. Is one piece, that interacting with others. There's another piece of reflecting. The student sits back and goes, okay, I learned this, what does this mean? What did I understand? So they have to not just absorb it like a sponge, but they have to do more with it and think about it. There's also a part of applying what they're learning. And especially at the university level, we start with the students, we want them to analyze things depending on the course that you're teaching, plus many other things. What I mean by variety, they're interacting with the content, not just listening passively. Okay. Again, this was partly my idea and also from one of the sites. It's hard to find a really clear definition. And one site I did find had an interesting one, and I highlighted the words that I thought were key, was that this online learning insights group said, knowledge is actively constructed by the learner and integrated with his or her existing knowledge and experience. For me, that tied it together. That's what the active part is. The student themselves are interacting with the material. And they understand, so often we as teachers sometimes have to remember that what we've said or taught them, they may have learned something different based on how they take in the information. Okay. So one of the theories I want to talk about, how many of you are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy? Okay.
Hopefully all of us.
Hopefully, okay. So maybe I'll just very quickly, for those that don't know, this is sort of an idea of cognitive development, how learners have to start with some basic facts and information, and as they progress cognitively, they move up to these higher levels. So remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, create. Many teachers, many teachers use this to create questions for students, for tests, exams, essays, kind of thing. So I thought about this, and for me, I thought, well, basically, I think active and passive learning is kind of a continuum, and I think the passive learning starts at that, remember, the foundation aspect, and moves up to the active learning part of it. No? You disagree? Okay.
Good idea, though.
All right. But, I think we constantly go up and down at different levels, okay? The other one I wanted to talk about is dynamic skill theory. Anyone familiar with this? This is part of, I think, cognitive neuroscience and education development. It's basically a theory created by Kurt Fisher. It's talking about trying to figure out how the brain processes information, takes in information. And so it talks about it as different levels of learning. It starts with single set, just collecting facts and data. And then the next step is mapping, where they start to connect those facts together. And then even more connections, and then connecting different things, and the cycle will start again. So if you start a particular word, connect it to another word, like with the water example. Here's the taste the water, here's the word, you start connecting the idea and understanding, and then you can go develop higher cognitively into actual concepts rather than single level words. So it will repeat and come back. Okay? So I put them all together, and I think I thought Bloom's taxonomy sort of fell into this in a similar way. Remember and understand was kind of single set. Apply was starting to make connections. Analyze and evaluate was this multiple connections. And the create is making their own from what they've learned. And again, I think it's going from passive to active. This is my interpretation, putting them together. So what does this mean? I don't know if I have time. I wanted to very quickly show a very simple, maybe people know mind mapping. I wanted to show you can do it actually at concept level as well. The student was talking about it, read a passage, it was adoption, and concepts related to it. Closed adoption, open adoption, biological mothers, adoptive mothers. But they created it, they put them together, and then they shared it with their classmates. And their classmates, if they didn't understand, asked questions for clarifying. So they were kind of teaching their classmates. Okay, I'm behind. Okay, so I'll skip this one. Another kind of reflection. So I think reflection is a big part of it. Oops. You can also do it online if you're worried about time, but implications. I think assessment needs to be varied, both active and passive assessment. Why is this doing this?
Hello.
Hello? Okay. And I think this is connected. If the teachers don't include that in the assessment of the course, students are not even going to want to try and do it because it has no impact on their grade. So if they have active ones, they'll be willing to try, they become aware of different ways and learn different ways to do the task. I think we need to scaffold the activities. Why students can't analyze, evaluate something until they understand it. So they have to understand before they can do the next level. As teachers, we need to model this, how to do and guide them. Students need to make their own connections. I think it's more meaningful and deepens their understanding. If they've had the aha moment, this connects to this, rather than us telling them this connects to this. I think sharing when they talk with each other, if they share their connections and ask questions, they get a deeper understanding from this. Group discussion. So they get multiple perspectives. Okay, I'm supposed to stop.
You can keep going.
You can take a minute.
Okay, so my recommendations, I think we need to fundamentally, from the beginning, not just add in, but consider active learning with our content, the knowledge, skills, and awareness when we're creating our curriculum, not adding it on top. Oops. Okay, so we can add it later, which is what I see is happening at my university. If you use active learning techniques, but only do assessment that's, say, multiple choice, it's not effective because there's no need for the students to actually apply those activities. I think we can get deeper learning if the students are engaged in the material and not just trying to cover the material and test them on their ability to tell us what we told them. So I come to the idea of just learning about another culture doesn't mean they have ability to be successful interculturally. They need to learn and practice skills. They need to build higher level skills from doing and sharing their ideas, not just assuming they can do it. And we need to allow students to demonstrate their learning creatively. That's the highest level of Bloom's taxonomy, is to be creative, and I think the students are more engaged when they're creating something for themselves. So these are some references, so thank you.
Unfortunately,